Hey everybody, welcome to another Wiser Wednesday. Really looking forward to the chat today. So we've got James with us, James Piper, who is the author of The Rubbish Book and also ex-CEO of Ecosurety. So we're going to be mainly talking about rubbish, so stay tuned. I'm James Potten, and I believe in a world of entrepreneurial success without burnout. And as I often say, I've got this sort of charred t-shirt to prove it's almost possible. So look, really excited to have James here, or Pipes as he's known, because we were two Jameses. I was Potts, he was Pipes, so we'll probably refer to each other as that today. And we worked together, for a number of years, I think over 6 years at Ecosurety. And yeah, I saw you from the beginning and as you've developed and flourished and so on, James. So a little one fact about you: you've got a ridiculous amount of Lego. Can you explain quite how much?
Yeah, it's a lot. That's probably not a good place to start, is it? And he's got a lot of plastic. I'll start, but this is plastic that will never end up in a recycling bin. It's on a shelf. So yeah, I've got an awful lot of it. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, my wife knows. I keep a lot of it hidden, I think.
Yeah. Well, I understand, and it's a fantastic investment as well. So anyway, look, current backdrop, we've got AI, the hype is exploding at the moment, but as is the planet. So unfortunately, we're now expecting to breach the 1.5 degrees climate threshold by 2027. So it's a really important debate today, and maybe the former can sort of help the latter. Who knows? If you're listening live and if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. So look, James, to begin with, tell us a bit about your journey, and how you became a rubbish geek. Far away.
Cool. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me, Pot. So I joined Ecosurety in 2009. I was looking for a company that was going to do good for the planet, and I'd studied biology at Exeter and decided I wanted to make a difference. And I came across this company that looked like it really wanted to work with some interesting brands, interesting retailers, and make a difference. So I joined effectively as a graduate. I've held lots of roles over time. At one point, I was IT manager, famously when the website went down for 2 weeks. I've held lots of roles in the company.
No comment. It was handed to you as the website as it went down, I believe. So
I don't take too much responsibility for it, but we did get it back up and running. And latterly, I was lucky enough to become CEO. So I became CEO after Potts in 2016, and then ran the company for about 5 years before I decided I was going to go traveling with my wife and we'd go and see the world. So if you've seen that picture of me on LinkedIn that you keep promoting, I had a massive beard because I was just about to head to Antarctica, and I'd built up some beard to keep me warm.
Very jealous. I'm unable to do anything in that region. So not the North Pole or South Pole. I mean, around here, that's my limit. So
right. And then so we went traveling, and over that time the Rubbish Book was launched, which was a passion project for me to try and explain to consumers how to recycle and how complex the world of recycling is in a really simple way, or as simple as I could put it.
Yeah, no, it's great. Let's explore a bit more, what you obviously set out right in the book. I think it was a few years in the making, and as it's for anyone who's tried to write a book, you know how hard it is, and how determined you've got to be to do it. So why did you start, and why did you get through to the end to actually get it out there?
Yeah, I guess before I talk about Ecosurety, it's definitely worth talking about the book, and it's something I'm very excited by, something I'm very passionate about. I originally wrote it as a kid's book. I had this kind of idea that children wanted to know more about recycling than their parents, and they could teach them. And so I envisaged it to be a children's book. And I wrote it because I'd seen an article. It was actually on the BBC. I remember the date. It was the 17th of October, 2018. There was an article on the BBC that said plastic pollution found on shipwreck. And you can still find this article if you just search in Google, plastic pollution found on shipwreck. And if you look at the image at the top of that, there is plastic pollution that's on this shipwreck. I believe it's the HMS Invincible that had been raised, and they found this plastic. but there were only about 8 plastic bottles and there were 38 aluminium cans. And I was really interested that the BBC had chosen the headline "Plastic Pollution Found on Shipwreck" as opposed to, packaging found on shipwreck, or mostly aluminium, some plastic. In terms of the actual packaging that was on that shipwreck, it was mostly aluminium. And I just felt that bias and that hatred towards plastic makes us do really weird things. There's actually just been the most amazing study that shows that people believe things are more environmental if they have paper stuck to them. So even if you use the same amount of plastic, as long as you stick a bit of paper on it as well, you believe, or people believe, it's more environmental, which is just classic. When you demonize something, when you tell people that plastic is bad, they automatically believe aluminium must be good, or paper must be good, or the alternatives must be good. And I felt there was an opportunity to kind of rethink that. I like to give the example of the loo roll company that famously wrap their toilet rolls individually, and people believe they're doing a good thing, and they are a good company ethically. They do the right thing, but they are individually wrapping toilet rolls, and last time I checked, those toilet rolls were coming from China. So you compare that to a locally sourced product that's made from recycled paper, not virgin paper, that isn't individually wrapped in paper, and it would have a much better environmental impact. So we all get a little bit confused. So I thought I'll just write all of this up in a book and I'll make it appeal to kids. And that was back in 2018, 2019 when that article came out. And then I shelved it. I was going to self-publish it. I got scared. So I shelved it, I saved it in my hard drive, ignored it. And lockdown happened, and it's funny you mentioned Lego. We actually hadn't talked about that before, but there was a Lego book that came out at the start of lockdown, or that was being crowdfunded, and I came across this publisher that specializes in crowdfunding publishing. So the idea is you put your pitch up, people pre-buy the book, and then you write it, and then they get sent the book 2 or 3 years later. And I thought, wow, crowdfunding would be a really interesting way of doing this, because it would show that people were interested in recycling, they wanted the product. You get your name printed in the book if you crowdfund it, so it was nice for people who I know well who wanted to support the book. And so we put it out there. About 400 people pre-bought the book, and it got published, and it became a lockdown project for my wife and I. She drew the illustrations, because we made it super digestible. We filled it with illustrations. I wrote it. It went through all the usual publishing things, and then I went traveling around the world, and was lucky enough that halfway through those travels, while I was in Antarctica actually, it got published. And I came home just after Antarctica, found it in Waterstones, had the very exciting picture of me in Waterstones holding my book. So
awesome.
Yeah, it was an exciting few years, definitely.
Yeah, well, look, I was one of those 400, so really pleased to have received it, a signed, copy. And I'd say, I was going to, we had a quick chat beforehand. I would say that I've read it and really enjoyed it, but it's not a kind of pick it up and read from start to finish. You pick it up and you go to the area where you're, the thing that you're looking to recycle or trying to understand. So it's more, I guess, have you had anyone read it from beginning to end?
I've read it many times. I'm glad you clarified it was the reading it beginning to end and not the enjoying it that you.
Yeah, no, I did enjoy. No, it's good. Like, because there's stuff in there that you, and also this is a moving playing field. I always remember sort of like, is it, black plastic couldn't be recycled, but that shifted, hasn't it? It's
so I have had people read it beginning to end, but the idea was to have 150 topics that you could pick and choose, and maybe have it next to your recycling bin. So if you were like, oh, I can't remember if yogurt pots can be recycled, you can quickly flick to that page and have a quick check as to what kind of yogurt pots can be recycled. Black plastic's a really interesting one, which I talk about a lot in the book, around why that's difficult to recycle and how we make that easier.
Brilliant. Okay, well, look, we'll come back to the book a bit later. So let's rewind the clock right back. Where are we? So 2009. This is when we're going through the interview process, the rigorous interview process. You were probably asked to sell a pen or something as you were going into a more sort of commercial role at the time. I think it was more of a marketing role. I think you were employee number 19, and there were like 8 of us in the business at the time. So it was really early stage in the journey for the business, even though we'd been going for nearly sort of 5 or so years. So yeah, look, why did you join? And talk a bit about what is Ecosurety. So
Yeah, okay. Let's start with what Ecosurety actually is, because we keep talking about it as if because we know it very well. But the business works with packaging, waste electricals and batteries producers, so people who make those products, and helps them comply with environmental law. And the easiest way to describe that is if you buy a bottle of water, let's say from a supermarket, then that supermarket has to go and arrange the recycling of a bottle. And the person who manufactured the bottle has to recycle a bit, and the person who filled it with water has to recycle a bit. So everyone in the supply chain has to recycle a bit of that bottle. So we have kind of two jobs, to do the data work, to work out how many bottles were sold and what their weight was, what type of plastic, all those kind of things. And then we have the making sure that the recycling actually happens for those products. So making sure that we go to a plastic recycler and say, I need you to recycle this many bottles on this company's behalf. And we work with lots of big brands and retailers. So people like Nestle and Sainsbury's and Mars. So very familiar household names that we've built up over the years and work with. In terms of why I joined it, it was a much smaller company back then. We're at about 70 employees now. Back then, as James says,
7-0.
7-0, yeah. Back then we were at about 8, so much smaller. And it was really different. And I guess, why did I want to join Ecosurety? I'd had some pretty bad experiences over the years with some bad managers pre-Ecosurety. I should be very clear. And I was very keen to join a company that looked like it was doing the right thing from a cultural perspective, which I definitely got the feel of during the interview. And then I was keen to do something good. And as I say, it seemed really exciting. It was early stage. The business was still deciding its product mix. So it was still deciding exactly what its products were going to be. It was deciding what kind of clients it was going to be. And I think it's fair to say back then, when I joined in 2009, the kind of clients we had to have today, we could never have managed back then. It just would have been so much of a strain on the cash flow of the business and the capabilities. And so we spent a lot of time building capability and the ability for the business to work with essentially anyone. Which has taken a lot of growth and strain and interesting situations that we've gone through over the years. So I was very keen to join a small company. I think my friends were tending towards big brands that we knew, and I was quite keen to join something that I didn't really understand, to be a kind of bigger fish in a small pond, as it were, rather than the other way around. So I was very keen to join something that was kind of in the startup phase, looked like it had room for growth, and I could become part of, and that's exactly what happened over those years.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, it was interesting because it wasn't even called Ecosurety at the time, was it? It was called Budget Pack. So we'd set out with a the thing with compliance sometimes is people don't always want to. They can see it as a tax and just want the sort of cheapest way of dealing with it. And that was a mindset that we shifted in mindset and to go on that journey and to become like Ecosurety. And it was really interesting. That was a real shift. I remember us having a concept that, look, we wanted to create a company that was not necessarily in London, but had a sort of vibe of like, come here and become the best version of yourself. And that was really important, that sort of culture. What was your onboarding process like?
I still remember my first day like it was yesterday. I actually joined with 2 others on the same day, so there was a nice element of competition as to, certainly in our first few months, we were getting tested and all sorts of things, and it was like trying to get the best scores. So it was great fun, a really healthy, competitive environment. I think what was most interesting about the onboarding compared to where it is now was I probably spent half an hour in the first couple of days with every member of the team, getting to know them and understanding who they were and what they did for the company. And everyone had a very specific role. It wasn't so much teams. It was like, there's a finance person, there's a IT person, it wasn't really teams. And we all went to lunch together that first day. We were based up in Aztec West. We all went for lunch, and it was very different. And every time someone joined, we went out for Toby's Carvery, and it just was ridiculous how much food we were eating because the company was growing so rapidly. And it was just, and I compare that to today, where everything is way more hybrid, and we're growing so fast. on average probably 2 or 3 people a month, maybe more than that even, and it's quite hard to get to know everyone. So we've just had our 20th anniversary, and we've just spent a couple of days at the Eden Project, which was amazing. And I'm like, there's so many people here I don't know, there's teams I don't know, which is amazing really, compared to where it's come from and what that onboarding looked like. And what's kind of interesting about that, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about it, is how you keep the culture of a business, where it's quite easy when there's like 8 people and you're sort of recruiting people that you know are going to fit within that quite small environment, and you're trying to get diversity and try and bring in something a bit different each time you recruit, to a similar sort of setup, but you're moving into a more hybrid environment, and there may be a chance that people don't meet people for months, compared to me having a lunch with everyone over those first couple of days and getting to know them all. So yeah, I really enjoyed the onboarding process of the small company, and I'm excited as to how we've been able to take the kind of cultural aspects that really work for us and move them into this more hybrid environment with a much larger company.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No. Really. Yeah. That's amazing. Like, and hats off to you guys to sort of continued that. I'd forgotten the Toby Carberry thing, but it worked. It worked really well, because everyone looked forward to someone joining because you got to go up for Toby Carberry.
Yeah, and then it was always someone's job to print out the ice cream vouchers before you went.
Yeah. So we got 2 for 1. It was brilliant. It was just yeah. It was a real. I mean, that was really it was really like ingrained in the heart of the business. And we went through that process of defining the values. So the values were earlier on in that journey. We did it as a team. I don't know if you remember that session. We'd probably, because we had a jump, didn't we? We kind of went from like 2.8 to 8.9 mil turnover in 1 year, and then suddenly had to go in. We started the grad program because it was the only way we could bring on enough people. We started like hiring 3-4 grads at a time. And that first kind of Christmas, we did the values session. I remember it being, I think Steve played. He played. It must be Olympics time, because he played the after the Olympics, like all the sort of British medals and so on. Really inspiring. And then we all like took part, and like we had value cards, and we all like chose cards that mattered to us, said why they mattered. Did it over like 2-3 hours out of the office, and obviously had our Christmas party afterwards. But that was a real kind of moment where people could connect with why they joined the business. I felt so. It was, and there was a lot of us. Because we'd grown so quickly, you needed to do that exercise for people to feel like they were part of building that new culture. So
absolutely.
So yeah. What have you sort of seen change? What's changed? Yeah, like from when you started to when you really saw the business motoring, that example of that jump, the 3 times multiple in 1 year is like a big multiple. And you've obviously like replicated that again, like since in different order of magnitudes. But what was it, do you think, that we started to really like nail down, like as a business, to be able to, so everyone was kind of put in the right direction in that type of thing?
Yeah, I think you kind of got a couple of things there. Obviously, when I started, it was very much startup mentality. We just had to get things done, work whatever hours we needed to work, and just really, it was kind of success or failure on the product mix that we were introducing. We were just getting into kind of batteries recycling, which is, when you go in a supermarket and you have to put a battery in a bin. I was like designing those bins as my first job, and finding them in supermarkets and taking photos of them, sent to the team. So it was like real startup mentality. And we had different points where we had to grow up, I think. And, that 0 to 10, I wasn't part of too much, but I was certainly part of the, 10 to 25 people, and then 25 people to 50. And I would say that's where we had these kind of points where you reflect on the culture and make sure what you've built is correct. And, going from 10 to 25 was really interesting, and that kind of, right, we need to get ISO 9001, we need to do all of these things to make sure that we're really strong as a business. And then 25 to 50 brought its own cultural challenges, because you start talking about opening different offices all in the same building but in different spaces, so suddenly people have to walk to talk, and this is before everyone was hybrid. So it's really interesting. And then as we've gone 50 plus, and the turnover's grown and the business has grown very significantly, taken on very significant clients, and we're now at 100 million plus turnover. It's a completely different business again, and now it's less about kind of sales. I would say the business was very sales focused, and I think now it's gone back to that kind of product mix focus. What product are we offering? How do we make that the best it can be? Because we've got the brands and retailers that we want to work with. And then how do we transition them into new products and new services we can offer? So it's sort of like a curve where it started off very much in product mix, and then we won lots of brands and retailers, became very sales focused. And I would say we're kind of going back into that product mix now, where it's like, right, well, we've taken a significant market share. We've got all these really good brands. We're doing what I consider to be a fantastic job for them, and doing all these amazing things. How do we expand our remit? How do we do more with them? And that's really where we are at the moment.
Yeah, amazing. I remember sort of what's quite interesting is we sort of set out like writing, and it was around 2012 again, like writing a sort of 2020 vision, but you managed to track, not exactly, but not far off, like that tracks, didn't it, through the teen years?
Yeah, when I became CEO, I set myself a 6-year plan, which I laid out and said, this is what we're going to do. And I read it the other day, actually, funnily enough, because I've been moving house. So I went to clear out some of my old folders, and I was like, oh, okay, here's my 6-year plan I wrote. You look back at it with hindsight, you're like, wow, we achieved so much of this. It really was amazing about this kind of, I don't need to go into detail around it, but in terms of the financial plans, in terms of the plans of the kind of clients we would win and work with, we really tracked it very well. And it was a really interesting lesson to me, because at the time you felt like, I felt focused, but I didn't feel as focused as perhaps you look back in hindsight and go, wow, okay, we actually did everything we intended to do, and we did it sort of in the right timelines. It was great just to sit down, as I became CEO, sit down and go, what are my next 6 years going to look like? What would I consider to be success?
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. And what was interesting with that is there was a point so before, the 2009, 2010 sort of period, we'd write down plans, and it was really hard to actually like make it happen. And we'd started to introduce like KPIs, but hadn't really got into like the quarterly rhythms and so on. And then, yeah, and we can come on to like OKRs, but like that then next part of the journey, just we actually got the traction. So, I work with a lot of businesses now, and I'm always like, you've got to look forward. Where are you trying to get to? Otherwise you don't know whether you're going to, you're not going to get there. You'll get somewhere, but so you've got to like do that planning, but you've also got to like work out how to actually turn it into an actionable, that's why I work on Triple Horizons. I'm always like, you need like 3 to 5 years, 1 year, and then what's the next 90 days? And we got really good at getting those rhythms right. Do you sort of see that? I think because it wasn't just any one thing, was it? It was getting that right. It's getting the culture right. There's multiple things that had to come together for the business to go on a 100 million turnover trajectory, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's difficult to describe and put into words how that happened, but we underpinned it with a really good purpose, really good values that allowed us to map out then our OKRs below that. So our objectives and key results. And really it was about saying, okay, where do we want to be in 6 years? Okay, we've got that laid out. And then how's that going to work into 3 years? And then what does that look like in a year? And then, what does that look like in a quarter from a key result perspective? And start looking at outputs versus inputs. I don't really care, or I didn't care, how many hours people worked for us, or when they were working, or what they were doing. What I cared about is, were we achieving these outputs that were really clear and really locked into the business.
Yeah, and maybe that's good time to move into sort of OKR. So for people who haven't come across them, it's objectives and key results. We kind of had POKRs, didn't we? So we had purposeful objectives and key results. So we kind of created this thing where it's like, it has to have purpose. Like, why are you trying to achieve this objective, and does it get you out of bed in the morning? And then obviously the key results are effectively like KPIs, things that you have to do that are broken down to achieving that. But that it's almost, like my time had sort of, come with the business when it was, when I moved on, it was that had been the point when we'd managed to get ISO like 9,000, 14, 18,000, like OKRs were working, like this sort of, suddenly we had like the map of how to systematize and get the business, like everyone pointing in the same direction. So yeah, like from your perspective, I know, because I had an obsession with like cascading OKRs. So yeah, talk us through a bit about like how because you've continued with OKRs, I think, haven't you? If you kept.
Yeah, I think yeah, good to check that we've continued it.
Yeah, that's you.
Yeah, well, it's the design of the business. We've this output versus input point. It's very, what I think businesses have a tendency to get into this kind of micromanagement space where it's like we need to know exactly what everyone's doing. Whereas, take for example, I want to win, I don't know, 5 contracts this year, let's say, then all I need to do is measure that. I mean, the sales guys can then have, this is how many meetings, this is how many proposals, this is what that conversion rate is going to look like. And that's your key result piece, which we don't need to spend time on. We can just spend time on the objectives. And if the objective isn't hit, we can then go back and look at what wasn't working. And I'm a big fan of that kind of output delivery. As a manager, we shouldn't really get into this kind of, have you been to that meeting? Because I think if I just go into kind of my style as a manager, it's much more just, I think businesses can have a tendency to become like school, where it's, you need to be here on time, you need to wear this, you need to do this. And obviously the world has evolved, and this was quite radical thinking, when I became CEO almost 10 years ago, where I said, look, I'm just going to throw out the rule book, and you work as you need to work, you turn up when you want to turn up, you take a day off if you need to take a day off. I don't really care what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. You can work at 3 a.m. if you want to, as long as it doesn't affect your job. And so then you have customer service people going, okay, well, I can't work at 3 a.m. because my customers are live 9 to 5, and they're making that decision for themselves, and they didn't need to get holiday approved by their manager, because we trusted people to look at everyone else's calendars and work out whether they could have holiday or not. So for me, it was about treating everyone like adults. We only kept 2 things, which famously get removed at this point. We kept expenses guide and holiday days, because every study shows you if you give people unlimited holiday, they take less. So we said, no, we want you to take the right amount. So we kept the number of holiday days. And for expenses, we tried to get rid of expenses, as in say, look, you can expense whatever you want. And that just meant people were quite scared to expense reasonable hotels, and they would stay in quite dodgy places. So we said, look, this is how much we expect you to spend. So those were the only 2 kind of rules, as it were, things that we had written in a handbook. Everything else was, we're going to treat you like an adult. And if you decide to kind of abuse that trust, I guess, then we need to have conversations, and we'll have those conversations. We're not afraid to have difficult conversations, but equally, if you enjoy that culture and enjoy that trust, then it's going to be the best place to work, because you're not kind of draconian. And I guess that was the whole business. That was how we saw the whole business. That then fed into these kind of OKRs, and look, we trust you to get on with your job, and we don't need to know what you're doing. What we want is these key objectives that the business has, these very high level objectives, and we want to hit them, and we want to be excited about hitting them. If we don't hit them, we want to look at that, but we did it within this kind of really interesting culture and environment. And we moved hybrid. We moved to this office in Finsel's Reach January 2020, so just before the start of COVID. And we were reducing down to 20 desks from 50 desks, because we knew that people were working from home when they wanted to, and doing what they needed to do around their lives, and work wasn't their it was a priority, but it wasn't like the only thing going on in people's lives. And we recognized that, so we moved to this 20-person office. We've grown to a 70 person now. We've had to put a few more desks in, but not many. And most people will just hybrid work. But we were doing that before COVID. That was our aim anyway, because the business had already gone that way. And I guess what's interesting is the world is sort of catching up to that now. And we've seen that really deliver amazing results, absolutely amazing results, by just giving people that autonomy and giving them the feeling that they can do what they need to do within their work.
Yeah, it's super interesting. It's like, the concept like business like grows in like S curves. So you get this like growth spurt, you like, and you often need different teams to grow through those different S curves. The foundations, there was a lot of like defining what was needed to be able to achieve like the outcome. So once you've gone through that process, you can then become much more outcome focused, I guess, because you've defined what, process wise, there's a lot of things like where the dovetail is between different roles and so on. It's it's really interesting that you can become more outcome focused once you've defined what good looks like.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, brilliant. And like, and back to just like a bit, one last thing on cascading, because I remember we had sort of doing good as this kind of concept, and in terms of culture, we talked about being the type of person who picks a piece of litter up and puts it in the bin, not like, just walking past it. So that's quite, every time I see a piece of litter, I still think about it.
It's nice. It's nice to just have something in something simple that kind of encompasses your culture. And for us, that was it. We're going to do the right thing. We're going to always be the person who helps out, basically. And one of the things we did was we defined a purpose. I can't remember what year this was. It would have been around the rebrand. I said I want a better purpose because we had one that was very compliance focused. And you look at something like Disney, where I think their purpose is something like to make people happy, and it's like, well, then you can do anything. I could be wrong, but I thought that was theirs, and that would mean you could have a theme park and films, and the brand became so much more about the feeling rather than the product. And I think if you look at Apple, they're a great example of this. And I know Simon Sinek talks about this a lot with the golden circle. Start with the why. I always say Apple could launch a lawnmower tomorrow, and there is a percentage of the population that would queue up for the iLawn. Even though they have no experience in gardening, and it's completely weird. And if you said Dell are launching a lawnmower, you'd be there going, that's weird. And they've made themselves this kind of, they've given themselves the permission and ability to launch anything because their customer base is more in tune with them as an organization and their feeling that they generate rather than the product itself. And I was wondering how we could do that, how we could make it so that our customers really enjoyed being part of us because they knew it wasn't about the product, it was about the feeling that we gave. And so we decided to change our purpose away from something very specific, and we landed on change for good. This idea that we would make change in what we did and it would be permanent, the wordplay on for good, so it'd be permanent and better. And suddenly that created all sorts of weird things. So we created it and we said, this is what we want to be. We want to make change for good. And we had people coming in. We had people coming in going, I've just discovered the thermostat comes on at 4 a.m, right? We were in a managed office. It comes on at 4 a.m. So I've written to the management company, it's now going to come on at 7. And it's like, wow, 3 hours a day of heating just gone, just because of that purpose. And we moved from having Domino's for our team meetings to having, really amazing food that had been left over and was then turned into team building food, and all these little things that existed in the business that we just made tiny tweaks. And it was like, okay, we're doing something better. And as long as we kept doing that, then we'd get better and better and better. And then we did the same with our product range. And we said, how do we make our product more transparent and more focused? And at the time, there was a lot of talk around exporting, and there still is, exporting recycling. So how do we buy a lot more of arrange a lot more of our recycling within the UK? And all these kind of big macro product questions we started asking ourselves. And then we made our products better and more transparent. And so companies joined us. We had suddenly had all these massive brands and retailers saying, we want to be part of this because you're doing the right thing. You're demonstrating that you're making real change, and it's in your DNA, it's in your culture. And that's meant that as we've got up to 70 people and as we've grown our turnover significantly, we keep coming back to, are we making changes for the better? You know, are we, you know, so we've got a B Corp now. We're one of the only we were the first B Corp in our industry, and we're now the second. There's another one that's come in. But we did a lot of work around becoming a B Corp, a lot of work around our ISO accreditations and the organization itself and the structure and all those kind of things that has allowed us to continue what is quite a unique culture, even as it grows. And even as I don't recognize people, it's amazing to see how they fit in within that culture, because we have this kind of underpinning, look, we're here to do things better than the day before. And if we just keep doing that, then we get better and better. We're never going to be perfect, but we'll always get better.
Yeah, that's awesome. So it's just that sense of like progress and the sense of, yeah, like not standing still.
That's it.
There's a really interesting photo from like 2016 with a team of around circa 45 people in it, and a photo from the team in 2022, circa 45 people in it, but only 8 of the same people. You know, I often sort of point to that as an example of the importance of, you know, systems and the importance of process, but also heart. So yeah, I mean, you obviously you were there for that whole journey. So is it something where you've seen people, even if the people change, because you've got things defined, you're able to bring someone in new that may even be like more appropriate for like the next S-curve of the business?
Yeah, and I've had that exact moment that you experienced. You know, I went traveling for a year and a half and I left knowing everyone. And towards the end of my travels, I saw a team photo and I was like, there's 32 people there I don't know. And so I've had to get to know everyone as I've come back, and that's been amazing. And it's a really interesting feeling to have been part of a business for 15 years, to know everyone, to spend time with everyone, to suddenly having to introduce yourself and people having to work out who you are. I should say, by the way, I'm not CEO of Ecosurety anymore. I know you've said that before, but in terms of my role, I'm a non-exec director and shareholder, so I am still involved in the business, which is why I say hello to people. I don't just like keep
ignore them.
I mean, I might turn up when they don't want me to turn up.
I'm going traveling.
I am still involved in the business, so that's why I know I've met people. So I've experienced that. I think culturally, what's been really interesting is I think we've got really good at recruitment. We try really hard, you know, we avoid all the classic mistakes like recruiting in your own image. We try and bring in a very diverse team of thinkers, innovators, pioneers, whatever we're looking for at the time. And we've got very good at being bolder at kind of recruiting the right people and saying no to the wrong people. And I think in the past, when you're in that rapid growth phase, you're like, I just need people in the business. Mm-hmm. And I guess you can end up with not the culture derailing, but the culture becoming harder because you've got different types of people coming into the business. And I think once you're very clear on what you want your business to feel like and look like, you can introduce that to people during the interview process and really see whether they're engaged with that and excited by that. And then if people come into the business who are excited about the culture, very quickly they will support that culture and develop it and make it even better. If you get people coming in who aren't excited by the culture because you haven't been able to define what it actually is, then you can end up going a bit backwards and having to rethink it. So I think the key for me was really working out exactly how we felt and who we were, and being able to describe that in the really early phase of someone coming into the business, so that they were then joining with that knowledge and joining with the excitement of developing that even further and making it better, rather than trying to work against it because it didn't match their what they were excited by.
Yeah. Look, I mean, and what's really interesting about defining and in basically setting out your stores to like, this is, you know, we may not be here yet, but this is where we want to be and this is who we want to become. Like that's, it's almost like a, you know, cognitive dissonance that's needed, like to understand we're not there yet, but this is where we want to be, and we know it, you know, there's a gap. But that journey, you know, people will leave. You know, when you do this exercise and you say this is where we're going, you will lose people. Like it's just natural. That, you know, that's something that I did notice with whenever we went through one of those transformation like processes. We lost people it just wasn't always, it wasn't for everyone. And that's, that is the reality of trying to define where you'd like to be rather than just accepting where you are.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to, is there any, I did have one question, like, looking back, is there anything you would have changed?
That is a very difficult question. It's difficult to know what would have, because you kind of look at it and you say, well, we've made good progress and it's been really fun and the business is in a really good place at the moment and has been in a really good place for a number of years. And I guess you look back and say, well, if I'd made changes, what would have been different? Would it have been better or worse? So I don't look back that much. Just okay, we moved on. We moved really fast and it looked really good. I can't think of anything obvious that we would have changed. And
you never know what, because
exactly. I
don't have a control.
Yeah, I can't think of anything off the top of my head that because, as you say, you just don't know what way it would have gone. All I know is I think we took the right risks at the right time, and a lot of those have paid off and worked. I think some things we were quite far ahead of the market. I guess that maybe that's what I would have changed. Like there were products I was launching and things I was doing, particularly around transparency and around trying to get the market into a better place. And the market was very stubborn and didn't want to move and didn't want transparency, and people didn't want to pay extra for knowing where their stuff came from. And we're in a much different place now, in terms of like recycling. People really care about, brands and retailers do really care about where their stuff's going and what's happening to it. And I guess I was probably 2 or 3 years ahead of the market getting to that point. So I don't look back at that with any regrets, because lots of people joined us off just the ideas and the excitement. But I feel we probably could have delivered faster and more had we just gone with the crowd. But that's not very exciting. So I don't think I can say my change would be less innovative, which is basically what I'm saying. I think it's just, if you are a pioneer and you're doing things ahead of the market, I guess is be prepared to fail, because the market might not come with you. But what it does do is set you up as like, okay, these are the kind of people I want to join. This is the kind of business I want to be part of, because I'd rather be with the people who are thinking outside the box and failing, or not, not failing, but not having the market come with them. I'd rather be with those people than the people who are following. So I wouldn't even say that was a bad thing. It was just, it's an interesting observation that we were moving faster than the market was ready to move.
Yeah, really interesting. Yeah, and look, if you look at trends, it's happened through necessity. The public have woken up. It's a very different narrative to what it was, in 2012 around like waste and recycling, and which leads us back to the book, really. So let's talk about that. What's next for you? What you've got your rubbish brand, which I think is brilliant. Your book's been a great success. It's been converted into Chinese, I think, soon to be released, or maybe even out now.
I'm still waiting for my Chinese copy. Yeah.
So yeah, look, what's next for you?
Yeah, I think my role is to now, I'm enjoying working within Ecosurety part-time to help that business get shaped really well, and I'm excited by that. But I'm very excited about making recycling easier for consumers and helping us all understand how to recycle better. And however I do that, I've got loads of ideas within the rubbish brand. We've got the rubbish book, and there will be other things I launch inevitably over the coming months and years that are all geared around helping people recycle better. I'm also doing a lot of non-exec work, so helping a labeling company that puts labels on all of our products to tell us whether they can be recycled or not. I'm working within a fund that's investing in recycling technologies to help us all be able to recycle more. So I'm kind of just trying to I am staying at the forefront of the recycling industry, just with an aim to getting us recycling more and recycling better.
Right. That's sounds really exciting. Are you how does the book help people recycle?
Yeah, so I think the key thing for me is stories. So I never remember whether a drinking glass or a Pyrex glass jug can be recycled. But the second I remember that, bottles have different melting points to all other glass, you start thinking, okay, well, if I was to put that in a fire, it wouldn't melt at the same rate. So therefore I probably shouldn't put in, drinking glasses, Pyrex jugs, all those kind of things. So I'm a big fan of telling stories and people remembering the story rather than the product. So probably the best example of this, and the one I roll out all the time, literally is about balls of rubbish. So when recycling is sorted, so if we're putting all our recycling in a bin, let's say outside or at your house, and it's mixed together, so you've got metals and glass and cans and paper all going into one bin, it's going to go to a material recovery facility, which is going to pick it out and look for certain types of material. And the way it does that, I mean, it's long and convoluted, but each material has a different way of getting stuff out. So steel is going to be, they're going to use a magnet to get steel out. Glass, they're going to crush it and it's going to go through a filtration type system. Paper, they put it in like a giant washing machine and it separates all the paper out. So each material has its own way of getting taken out. And you don't need to remember any of that. All you need to remember is that anything smaller than a tennis ball probably won't get sorted and will probably either fall off a conveyor belt or it's not designed for that machinery. So the second you have that, you can start thinking, okay, I've got a coffee pod. Well, a coffee pod, it's going to be really difficult for that to get recycled because it's smaller than a tennis ball. So I'll join Podback, which is a scheme I've helped launch, which has a specific bag for coffee pod recycling so that we can collate it all together and send it to a recycler together. So coffee pods are a great example. Or I've finished my dinner and I've got a bit of aluminium foil and I roll it up. Oh, it's smaller than a tennis ball. I'll wait till I've got some more and I'll make that bigger. Or I've only got a little bit of tin foil. I could put it in an aluminium can because now it's bigger. So once people start remembering smaller than a tennis ball, almost impossible to sort, you don't need to tell them about coffee pods and aluminium foil and all the things that are smaller than a tennis ball. You can just go, look, make it bigger than a tennis ball and it's probably likely to get recycled. And that's how I've approached the book. It's like, how do we create these really simple rules that help people put things in the right bin in the right way, and they don't have to remember, what do I do with coffee pods? What do I do with this? What do I do with that? So we've written out all these rules and tried to make it as simple as possible. And in the book, we still have here's 50 common household items. Can they be recycled or not? Still have that. But I've tried to create these very simple rules around things like black plastic and size and material type that help people just remember maybe 5 things, and that'll allow them to be amazing recyclers.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it really sticks. That, just that concept of a tennis ball, it's weird, and people just wouldn't know it. It's just not. That's definitely not on any of the stickers you get from your council.
Yeah, exactly. We don't talk about it, and yet it's the easiest way to remember it, I think.
Yeah. What's one surprising fact about recycling?
Well, I think the one that everyone obsesses with, every time I do any interview, they always focus on this one. So I'll give this. It's similar to the tennis ball rule, but slightly different. Lids. So whenever we talk about lids, so bottle lids, beer lids, whatever it is, the key is to put them back on the bottle. So if you're drinking a plastic bottle, put the lid back on. And actually, a lot of Coca-Cola now you'll find is tethered.
Just seen, that's happened recently.
People are like, why is it tethered? And if you look at the top, it says, I'm attached so that it's easier to recycle. And that's the reason. It's smaller than a tennis ball. But it's the same with beer lids. If you've got a glass beer bottle, put the metal lid back on when you've finished and then put that in the glass bin. And with the glass guys, they all have magnets to pull those or eddy currents to pull those lids off when it gets crushed up. So the glass bottle is going to get crushed up, the lid comes off, and then they separate them and they send that off to be recycled. With the plastic guys, they're actually different types of plastic. You can't have the same type of plastic because you end up with like color leakages and things. So the bottle will be PET, the lid will be a harder plastic like a PP or whatever it is. And so what they do is they shred them and then they put it in a tank of water, and the bottles, I forget which way around it is. I'm assuming it's the bottles float and the lids sink, but it could be the other way. I can't remember. It's in the book. this is my plug to buy the book, so you can find out. They're basically putting it in a giant water tank, and the two types of plastic separate. And so once you've shredded it up, it's the easiest way to do it. So that's how they separate the lids from the bottles. It means you can tighten them up and it won't have any problems. And I think whenever I talk about lids, people are like, what, really? And I think one of the things this tells us is the biggest problem with recycling is every council does things differently. And some councils signed their contract with their sorting facility, 10, 20 years ago. So a lot of the advice we get on the websites is actually out of date. Some councils will say, take lids off, and they will have that on their council website. Ignore it. Only with the lids and size stuff. Just put them back on. There is nobody who can't sort that. It's fine. And that is actually national guidance to keep lids on. So one of my biggest frustrations is councils with these very old contracts with facilities that said, no, you can't do this, you can't do that. But over time, those facilities have developed, but the contracts haven't. And so we end up with some quite mixed messaging between councils. And so there are some things that are nationally recognised, like putting lids back on, that you can just do, even if a council says you can't. It's definitely the right way to go.
Yeah. Okay, that's really helpful and great advice again. Where do you think the world of waste is heading?
Oh my goodness, we've only got 9 minutes. I could talk about this for hours, so I'll give a digested version. I mentioned what Ecosurety does. So Ecosurety ensures that a bottle is recycled for a number of parties in a supply chain, for example. The world is moving towards that cost. So right now, when we put a plastic bottle in our recycling bin, the cost is picked up by the council through our council tax. And there is an element of cost that is picked up by that supply chain, but it's very small in terms of what Ecosurety does and what producer responsibility does, which is this piece of legislation. It picks up about 10% of the overall cost of waste management. And the UK is moving to a space under the Environment Act, very shortly moving to this space, where the brand will pay for all of the recycling. So the council will say, it costs me this much to collect bottles, cans, and then they will take that entire cost and put it back to the brand. So right now we have this two-tiered system. We pay for it with our council tax. Brands pay a little bit. In the future, it's going to be brands paying for all of it, which is massive. So a lot of the discussion at the moment is, how do we set up for that system? Because it's coming in very soon, in the next couple of years, where all of the waste management that we do, as in all our stuff that we put out for our council, the costs will be covered by the brands. And then the idea is that you will pay more. Let's say you had two companies putting equal products on the market, as in the same plastic, same weight. If one of them was using black plastic and one of them was using clear, the one using black would be penalized and have to pay more because it's less likely to be recycled. So the idea is that it will shift people into more recyclable products. That is one part of this. So there's 4 pieces of legislation. There's that one, which is the kind of improvement of the current system. There's deposit return schemes, which you see a lot about in the news, where for drinks, cartons and bottles, we will have to pay a deposit. And then when we return it, we get a deposit back. So that will stop bottles and drinks being part of our council tax, council remit. You then got the plastic packaging tax, which has already gone live, which is a tax for companies if they don't use recycled plastic in their product. And then finally, we've got this one that is in the news all the time, but you might not know it. You might not see it. It's called consistency of collections, which is the idea that councils should collect the same thing in the same way, making it super easy for us. So they need to collect food waste by 2025, I think it is, weekly. Don't hold me to, I think that's true. And then 2027, they need to collect film and soft plastic. So the plastic that you see currently being collected at supermarkets. So we've got these 4 pieces of legislation that all work together. DRS takes the drinks cartons, plastic packaging tax, make sure recycled plastic is in the product, consistency, make sure we all know what we can recycle and where, and then EPR funds it all. And EPR being the brands paying for everything. All 4 of them work together. None of them work individually. And unfortunately, the problem the government have at the moment is they're delaying all sorts of things. So if you look up consistency of collections on Google now, you see loads of news stories about the fact that that's been delayed. And so we're going to end up with this position where brands are paying for our collections, but the collections aren't consistent or good. So brands are paying for something that they don't want to pay for. They want to pay for consistency and good collections. So our frustration at the moment is those four are not linked. They're all treated individually and they need to come together. But I guess the question everyone asks here is my council tax going to get cheaper? No, I don't have to pay.
I was going to ask that.
Not a chance in hell.
You're just going to pay more for
councils want the money, they're just going to put it somewhere else. But
so you just pay more for packaged goods.
Yeah, they've worked it out. I can't remember the exact amount, but it was, you know, between 100 and 200 pound a household, I think, a year to cover the cost of this legislation. So it will get passed to us, and that's part of the reason they want to delay the launch of this, because now we're into cost of living and all these different things. It's like, how much do we put back on the consumer? So it will end up being passed to us through what we buy. I guess the idea is that it will be more expensive, in theory, to buy a black plastic tray than a clear plastic tray. So you might, as a consumer, make a different decision of what you're buying based on its packaging type. Whether that actually comes true or not, you know, I think that's what the sugar tax was meant to do, right? For soft drinks that had sugar and soft drinks that didn't. The reality is they just up the price of everything and keep it all the same. So it's unlikely, I think, that it would get passed in that way, but that's the intention of the legislation, that we will make better decisions.
Okay, awesome. That's super interesting to hear where it's going and what's around the corner. Disappointment. I'm sure that council tax won't be going down, but you know, I think it only makes sense that there's the sort of direct responsibility. This might be too big a question for the last 4 minutes, but I've recently become a mentor for the UK Space Agency Accelerator, and I sort of see that we can save the planet and explore beyond this world. But I often find there's a kind of binary view. Like, why do you think that is with people?
Oh, that is a big question. Sorry, binary view in terms of saving the planet versus getting off the planet.
Yeah.
I guess it costs a lot of money to get off the planet. So you might, you know, if you're going to do one, they both cost a lot of money. So I guess people are like, oh, we should do one or the other rather than double investment. I mean, if you ask me, I think we should be doing what we can here and getting things right. And I think there's a huge opportunity. You know, we've seen this kind of evolution of compostable packaging, which is complex. I mean, that's a whole different part of the book. But we have seen this evolution of alternative packaging types, and I would say the dialogue is the strongest it's ever been, you know, because of things like Blue Planet and things that were happening. There is a very strong opinion out there around whether we should use certain packaging types, and I think we need to capture that, work out what the best packaging is and get it out there. In terms of the bigger question around should we be focusing on sustainability or leaving, you know, I think there's a huge opportunity to get the planet in, you know, to fix some of the things we've done, and I'm only looking at a small part of that in the packaging, waste, electricals and batteries sector, and obviously there's lots going on in other areas, but I definitely think we should do what we can while we can. Yeah,
I don't think it's an either or. I think you get like, but progress, and you talked about this as, you know, never sitting still, it is a way of like developing new ideas. You always get like benefits from like one, you know, life is a radar diagram, a spider diagram. When you push out like some learning in one place, you get new learning in another place, and then you get transference of like knowledge. So yeah, I think there's an and between it, and like it's not just stay here or leave. I think that there's just, we learn so much from trying to understand how to explore beyond this planet. Anyway, look, you know, just in the 1 minute left. So what advice would you give leaders listening today?
I think, well, for me, I think it's about trusting your people. That's my big thing. You know, it's like, how do we make sure that people feel they have autonomy and deliver a good job, and they want to deliver a good job rather than we're forcing them to deliver a good job. And for me, that's about trust. I think, you know, Potts, you were extremely trusting of me, and you know, I joined the board at about 24, I became CEO at 28 and a shareholder at 33. You know, these were massive leaps in my career and my evolution, and it all stems from the opportunities I was given as a graduate to join this business and help make it grow, and be trusted to be like, okay, you can do what you need to do to make a success of your of the business and your career. And I think I'm a big advocate then for trying to pay that forward, essentially, by giving people that opportunity and making sure if they want those opportunities, they get them. And, you know, I constantly viewed my management style as making myself redundant. I had a new job, you know, every year, essentially, because I was constantly trying to make myself redundant to get the next job. And I think if I didn't feel trusted to keep progressing, then I'd be worried about doing that. So I wouldn't be trying to make my job that I was currently in as good as I possibly could, so I could step away from it, if that makes sense. So I think that was the opportunity for me, and that's the advice I would give leaders.
Yeah, no, amazing. And I always remember the mantra, which is, you know, do you have like 5 years experience, or do you have like 1 year's experience 5 times? So like it's just trying to always keep like fresh, understand what's happening. You know, it's everything's moving so quickly, you can't stand still. And yeah, like hats off to you for you know, stepping up, stepping into that role and taking it on the journey that Ecosurety has been and now beyond. So well done. Hey, look, so there you have it. You know, let's make sure we trust in our people, we nurture our culture, and recycle more than a tennis ball, I think, was the key takeaway from today. I love that. So hope you feel you can go out there and do good in your own way from this. Our next Wiser Wednesday will be on heart-led leadership with Jay Brown, so tune in. You have any questions for us, I'm sure James will be happy for you to link to connect via LinkedIn, or to ask via LinkedIn. You know, finally, thanks, James, you know, for today, for being an awesome speaker. Thank you to everyone for listening as well. I hope you feel slightly wiser this Wednesday as a result of joining us. So thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Cheers, James. Bye.